I like Jim Kerr. Do you know Simple Minds?
No, but I work with a...
The beloved British sitcom Are You Being Served captivated audiences for years, but a single moment changed everything. One infamous scene went too far, triggering outrage and controversy. What seemed like harmless comedy became a battle, ultimately leading to the show's downfall. Today we dissect that shocking scene, uncovering why it abruptly ended a cultural icon. Are You Being Served thrived on wit and eccentric characters for over a decade. Its demise, one fateful scene. Writers aiming for freshness made a risky choice, blending racial stereotypes with sexual innuendo. The result wasn't playful, it felt crude and offensive. In the 1980s, Britain grappled with racial unrest. Representation mattered. Jokes targeting race were no longer harmless, reminding people of real struggles. The sitcom turning these issues into punchlines clashed with the nation's mood. Laughter turned to silence, then unease. For many, the show's charm shattered. Once a symbol of British humour, it became a reflection of societal divisions. The show's humour had been risque, a wink and a nudge. But in this new climate, the joke felt harmful. Audiences questioned the intent. Harmless humour or something darker? The reaction was swift. Viewers wrote angry letters. Critics called it tasteless and outdated. Some fans defended it as just a bit of fun. But the tide shifted. Inside the BBC, executives knew there was a problem. Alienating a large audience, especially with rising inclusivity, was too great a risk. They couldn't defend the show as before. The trust with viewers cracked. That single moment was the turning point. It transformed the show from a darling into a liability. What had been cheeky British humour felt like a relic. It wasn't just one joke, it revealed a cultural shift. Comedy moved on, but Are You Being Served did not. Its downfall wasn't gradual nor a loss of interest. It was the direct result of humour that divided. In television, that can be fatal. The sitcom ended with controversy. Laughter was replaced by debate and disappointment. That infamous scene reminds us how fragile the line between humour and harm is, and how quickly a misstep can topple giants. For devoted fans, the scene was harmless. They blamed outrage on political correctness. Younger audiences and critics disagreed. Jokes felt outdated, insensitive, and guilty of keeping stereotypes alive. Innocent humour was now judged by sharper social values. Should comedy continue to challenge boundaries, or reshape itself for a world aware of fairness? The BBC was caught in the storm. It had tolerated the show's humour, making it a ratings magnet. But this backlash was louder and harder to ignore. The network, balancing tradition with progress, saw the show as a liability. Each complaint made it clear the tide had turned. The laughter that united Britain was fading. Viewers watched with discomfort. Characters felt like relics. The scandal symbolized Britain's struggle with identity and humour. It wasn't just about one joke. It was about who gets to laugh and whether comedy has an expiration date. Could a show built on earlier humour survive a society moving forward, or was this the end? The outrage revealed as much about the audience as the show. Comedy thrives on tension between what can and should not be said. In the 1970s, Are You Being Served played with these boundaries, becoming a national treasure. But by the time the infamous scene aired, the tricks drew fire. Britain had changed and television reflected it. The laughter was strained. What was a shared joke became a cultural question mark. Are You Being Served was once a cheeky emblem of British humour. But the controversial scene exposed change. Longtime fans saw the backlash as political correctness. Younger audiences saw the humour as harmful. The BBC faced pressure. Once a ratings success, the sitcom seemed out of touch. Balancing entertainment with responsibility meant reassessing the show's place. The debate wasn't just about one sitcom. It highlighted a cultural shift. The controversy signaled the show's decline. Laughter turned to discomfort. Ratings declined, critics pounced, and the BBC faced pressure to modernize. The infamous scene was a wake-up call. The dated formula couldn't survive. In 1985, Are You Being Served aired its final episode. There was no farewell tour. The ending was sudden. For a show that had been a household name, its departure felt muted. For fans, the cancellation was bittersweet. They grieved the loss, but acknowledged the spark had faded. The humor seemed stale compared to newer comedies. The end felt inevitable. Cast members moved on, some finding small successes, but none replicated the show's peak. Reruns offered nostalgic escape, but carried reminders of stereotypes. The sudden end left a complicated legacy. It was remembered with affection and unease, a reminder of how even beloved shows can stumble. For fans, it was a treasure trove. For critics, a cautionary tale. Television, like society, never stands still. What makes us laugh one decade might make us cringe the next. In that landscape, no comedy can stand still. Sometimes iconic creations come from simple beginnings. Are You Being Served was inspired by Jeremy Lloyd's time at Simpsons of Piccadilly, a London clothing store. The world of retail left a lasting impression. Another department store, Clements of Watford, inspired Captain Peacock. Are You Being Served almost never aired. The BBC shelved its pilot until the 1972 Munich massacre disrupted Olympic coverage. Needing filler, they aired the pilot, and audiences loved it. The network ordered a full series. Early struggles followed against Coronation Street. Ratings lagged until a new time slot, where the sitcom flourished. Viewers embraced its humor and eccentric characters. For 13 years, audiences tuned in. What began as an experiment became a beloved sitcom. On April 1, 1985, the curtain closed. The cast played a monumental role. Frank Thornton, Molly Sugden, John Inman, Wendy Richard, and Nicholas Smith remained constants. Their consistency gave the sitcom its heartbeat. Thornton's Captain Peacock, Sugden's Mrs. Slocum, Inman's Mr. Humphreys, Richard's Miss, Brahms and Smith's Mr. Rumbold formed a timeless chemistry. Even after the show's conclusion, the cast carried its spirit forward. They reunited in grace and favor. The cast's popularity extended beyond the series. On June 19, 1976, they performed in character during a special stage sketch. Looking back, it's striking how close the world came to never experiencing this sitcom. A short job in retail, a discarded pilot, and a tragic event all played a part. Creativity grows out of unexpected circumstances. For over a decade, the sitcom entertained and became a snapshot of British humor. It poked fun at class divisions, celebrated quirks, and gave audiences laughter. The legacy of Are You Being Served endures in reruns and fond memories. When Are You Being Served appeared in 1972, few could have guessed its impact. Who would have thought a sitcom about staff in a fictional department store would become a worldwide sensation? Timing is everything. Britain in the early 1970s was in transition. The 1960s had shaken up music, fashion, and cultural values. The economy was uncertain, and social traditions were being challenged. Audiences yearned for escape. Are You Being Served was bold, cheeky, and unlike anything else. The series found instant success because it dared to poke fun. Its comedy relied on innuendos and slapstick. The setup was simple: employees thrown together under bizarre rules. Each character was larger than life, turning workplace struggles into comedy gold. Unlike competitors, Are You Being Served didn't preach or moralize. Instead, it served light-hearted humor. The show thrived on suggestion, double meanings, and situations on the edge of scandalous. Audiences found this irresistible. As seasons rolled on, the sitcom transformed into a cultural landmark. It was a hit in Britain and found loyal fans in America, Canada, and Australia. Its British eccentricities made it universally appealing. People related to co-worker squabbles, bosses, and policies. Its characters were impossible to forget. Mrs. Slocum, with her hair and references to her pussy, became a favorite. Mr. Humphreys, with his personality and catchphrase, "I'm free," became the show's heart. Captain Peacock's formality and Mr. Lucas's remarks added layers. Together, they created a world so absurd yet so familiar that it kept audiences hooked. Beyond the laughter, the show's brilliance was also its danger. Much of its humor leaned on stereotypes and risque jokes. In the 1970s, this was groundbreaking, but as decades passed, the same humor began to look risky, even outdated. What had seemed funny began to feel controversial. Still, there's no denying the legacy. It was a product of its time, tuned to what audiences needed. It gave people permission to laugh and carved out space for camp comedy. And it created characters and catchphrases that have outlived the show. The show's success came from walking a delicate line, ensuring it would still be remembered and debated. At the core of Are You Being Served? Was a cast of unforgettable characters. Each personality was a mirror of society, stretched to comical extremes. At the center stood Mr. Wilberforce Claiborne Humphreys, played by John Inman. With his mannerisms and catchphrase, "I'm free," Humphreys was more than comic relief. He was the show's heartbeat. His camp humor pushed boundaries. While it relied on stereotype, it also opened conversations about identity. Beside him was Mrs. Slocum, brought to life by Molly Sugden. With hair colors and double entendres, she was simultaneously the maternal figure and the source of laughter. Her prim exterior only made the innuendos land harder. Then there was Captain Peacock, portrayed by Frank Thornton, a man who embodied decorum. Always keen to enforce rules, his pomposity was skewered by the situations around him. In his character, audiences saw a mockery of authority. Hovering above it all was Mr. Rumbold, Nicholas Smith's store manager. He was the man who wanted respect, but whose missteps made him more pitiful. Balancing this ensemble was Miss Brahms, the young staff member, played by Wendy Richard. Her sharp tongue provided a counterpoint to the older employees. Where others clung to tradition, she embodied rebellion. Together, these characters created a rhythm of comedy. Their interactions turned a department store into a microcosm of British society. Viewers could point to their own bosses and co-workers. But comedy, like society, is never static. As years passed, tastes evolved, and the exaggerations began to feel outdated. The same characters who had been celebrated became lightning rods for criticism. And then came the moment that defined the show's decline. One scene that dared to push too far, a scene that forced fans and critics to wonder whether the laughter had crossed the line. Decades after it first lit up television screens, Are You Being Served? Still sparks conversations. To some, it's a treasure of British comedy. For others, it serves as a warning of what happens when humor leans too heavily on stereotypes. This split opinion has kept the show alive in public debate. At the center of its legacy lies the infamous scene that effectively brought the curtain down. That moment has grown into something larger than the show itself. Comedy has always walked a tightrope between entertainment and offense. One step too far, and what was celebrated suddenly feels distasteful. This scene forces us to wrestle with questions. Should comedy reflect its time, even if that culture feels outdated? Or should it be bold enough to challenge the status quo? And where is the line between boundary pushing and harmful offense? What makes Are You Being Served? Fascinating is how, despite these questions, the show continues to find fans worldwide. For many viewers, it's less about debates over taste and more about nostalgia. The costumes, wigs, and catchphrases weave together into a time capsule. To those audiences, the show isn't a scandal. It's comfort. It's a portal back to evenings spent laughing with family. This nostalgia was powerful enough that in 2016, the BBC attempted to recapture the spark with a revival, Are You Being Served? Again. The decision alone was proof that the show's weight hadn't faded. But while the revival stirred curiosity, its reception was far from unanimous. Some viewers welcomed the faces and tone. Others found it forced, a reminder that comedy, magic isn't easily remade. The mixed reviews highlighted a truth. The original Are You Being Served? Had thrived in a particular moment, and no revival could recapture the same lightning. Ultimately, the series occupies a rare position in television history. It was bold, daring, and outrageously funny, until it wasn't anymore. Its rise and fall stand as a reminder of how comedy is alive, shifting with the sensibilities of the audience. What makes one generation laugh might make another recoil. What once felt progressive can later seem dated, and what once carried charm can carry controversy. The legacy of Are You Being Served is therefore twofold. On one hand, it will always be remembered as a comedy classic. On the other, it will forever serve as a warning that every joke carries weight. Laughter is powerful, but so is offense. In the end, it took just one controversial scene to remind the world of comedy's fragility. A single misstep was enough to silence a cultural giant. That is perhaps the greatest lesson of, are you being served? Comedy is never just about making people laugh. It is about timing, context, and responsibility. And sometimes, one joke, just one, can bring it all crashing down.